She walked into her own bank in plain clothes and was denied a simple withdrawal. The manager laughed in her face. Minutes later, she fired him in front of the entire branch. She didn't pull up in a company car. She didn't wear a tailored suit. No assistant, no clipboard, no loud voice announcing her name at the front desk, just a woman in her mid-40s in a navy blouse and gray slacks holding her keys in one hand and a plain leather wallet in the other. Kendra Braxton looked like any other client when she walked into the Monarch Federal branch off Speedway Boulevard in Tucson, Arizona, and that was the point. She came alone, unannounced, because sometimes you learn the most about a place when no one knows who you are. The branch lobby was quiet. Fluorescent lighting hummed overhead. A few customers sat in padded chairs by the windows, scrolling their phones or filling out deposit slips. Kendra waited patiently behind a man in a neon landscaping shirt, who was chatting casually with one of the tellers when her turn came. She approached the counter with a polite smile. "Good morning, I'd like to make a withdrawal from my personal account." The teller, a young woman named Sherry, nodded. "Sure, I'll need to see your ID and account number." Kendra handed her both. But before Sherry could proceed, the manager, Stephen Aldridge, early 50s, thin-rimmed glasses, maroon tie, forced smile, stepped over from his glass-walled office. He glanced at Kendra, then at the ID, then back at Kendra. "I'm sorry," Stephen interrupted. "We can't process that withdrawal today?" Kendra blinked, confused. "I don't understand. Is there an issue with my account?" Stephen gave a thin chuckle. "Let's just say we've had incidents, people pretending to be someone they're not, large withdrawals. You know how it is." Kendra stared at him for a second, unsure if this was some kind of test. "My account is in good standing. I can give you additional verification if needed. He didn't ask for it instead." Stephen leaned against the counter with a practiced smirk. "We've had fraud attempts before. No offense, but we don't just take people's word for it, and this ID doesn't look like you." Kendra tilted her head, trying to keep calm. "It is me. I'm Kendra Braxton, CEO of this bank." A man behind her shifted in line. Sherry looked up quickly from her terminal. Stephen snorted completely. "Dismissing the statement, ma'am. Let's not waste each other's time," he said, waving a hand. "You'll need to come back with proper verification, or better yet, set an appointment." Kendra looked directly at him. "Stephen is it." He nodded curtly. She paused, then asked slowly, "Did you actually check the account in the system before you came over?" Stephen crossed his arms. "It's procedure. I don't need to look up every ID to know when something feels off." That was the moment, not when he refused the withdrawal, not even when he questioned her identity. It was when he said "feels off," as if her presence alone raised suspicion. Kendra's face remained neutral, but inside something tightened. She had LED'd this company through 2 mergers, survived a hostile board vote, and turned Monarch Federal into one of the most respected regional banks in the Southwest, and yet here she was, being treated like a criminal at her own institution by a man who hadn't bothered to verify anything. Still, she kept her voice. "Even Stephen, I suggest you check the account now just to be sure." Instead of doing that, Stephen turned slightly to Sherry, who had gone noticeably quiet. "Can you take care of this? I've got calls to make," he said already. Walking away, but before he could disappear into his office, Kendra pulled her phone from her purse, not to yell, not to cause a scene, just a single call. But what happened after that phone call would change the entire atmosphere inside that branch. Stephen's door clicked shut behind him, but the air in the lobby didn't settle. Sherry shifted uncomfortably behind the glass, her eyes darting between the monitor and Kendra. The other customers pretended not to listen, but every ear was tuned in. Kendra stood still for a moment, then stepped back from the counter. Phone still in hand. She didn't make the call just yet. "Sherry," she said, softly. "Do you see the name on that ID?" Sherry hesitated, looked down, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Kendra Braxton." Kendra gave her a half-smile. "And when you type that name into the account system, what do you see?" Sherry's fingers tapped hesitantly across the keyboard. A few seconds passed. Her eyes widened slightly. I see an executive account, Kendra Braxton, CEO." She cut herself off, glancing quickly toward Stephen's office. "You didn't know I was coming," Kendra said. "And I didn't want anyone to. But now that you see my information matches, is there anything else you need?" Before Sherry could respond, the office door opened again. Stephen returned, holding a clipboard. "He clearly didn't need. Is there still an issue?" he asked sharply, eyes flicking between them. Kendra didn't raise her voice. Sherry pulled up the account. "It confirms who I am. You can process the withdrawal." Now Stephen gave an exaggerated sigh. "Look." "Lady Miss Braxton," Sherry interrupted almost involuntarily. Stephen blinked. "I just checked her account shows. She's the CEO." Stephen's face twitched. Then it hardened. "Oh, so now we're just taking customers' word and letting them play dress-up," he snapped. Turning back to Kendra. "You show up here with no assistant, no warning, dressed like you're going grocery shopping, and we're all just supposed to believe you're someone important." Silence you could hear. The ballpoint pens stopped scratching. Even the man in the landscaping shirt put his phone away. Kendra stared at him for a long second, the same way she might look at a quarterly report that didn't add up. "I didn't realize my wardrobe needed approval to access my own funds," she replied. Stephen's jaw twitched. "It's not about your clothes, it's about protocol." "You're not following protocol," Kendra said. "You refused to verify my identity before making an assumption. You spoke to me with sarcasm and dismissed a valid ID, and now you're trying to tell me how to do my job?" Stephen asked. "No," she replied. "I'm trying to see if you're capable of doing it at all." He scoffed and turned to the other employees, throwing his arms out. "Can someone get this woman out of here before she causes a scene?" Sherry flinched. Another teller, a man in his 30s named Corey, stood up from his desk but didn't move. He just looked at Kendra, studying her face. "Now really looking at her." "Wait a second," Corey muttered. "Kendra Braxton. I've seen her before. She gave that speech at the Phoenix conference last summer about ethical banking." "That's her." Stephen didn't react right away. He blinked slowly, like his brain was catching up. Kendra took a step forward. Calm, collected, no raised voice, but there was weight in her. Words. "Now, I gave that speech because I believe people in positions like yours shape how customers see our institution. You've made it very clear. How you see me?" He opened his mouth again, but Kendra held up a hand. "This conversation is over. You had a chance to handle this with dignity. You chose something else." She turned, finally pressing call on her phone. It rang. Twice. Then, Lorna. "Hi. I need you to patch me through to HR right now." "Yes, this location." Then she ended the call. Stephen looked at her like he didn't know whether to scoff or laugh, but the energy in the room had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. The employees could feel it. Even the customers could feel it, but Stephen didn't understand just how fast things were about to spiral. Kendra didn't move far. From the teller window, she stayed planted, phone in hand, eyes steady on the entrance to Stephen's office. There was no yelling, no threats, just silence that wrapped around the room and made everyone stand straighter. She could have gone off. She had every reason. But this wasn't about showing off power that wasn't her way. Inside, she was remembering something her first branch visit as a newly appointed regional director back when she was still climbing the ladder at Monarch Federal. She'd walked into a location in Albuquerque, and the manager had asked her politely. At least if she was lost, she laughed it off. Then young black woman, sharp suit fresh off a promotion. She was used to the raised eyebrows. But she wasn't laughing now. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft ping, an incoming call. She picked up. "Yes, I'm here?" "No, he doesn't know yet." I'll hold Stephen had gone back into his office but hadn't closed the door this time. He was watching her, arms crossed, still smug, still clinging to the belief that she was bluffing. Corey whispered something to Sherry, who nodded slowly. One of the older customers, a woman with a checkbook and a walking cane, leaned toward Kendra. "Sweetheart, you okay?" That man was out of line. She said Kendra gave her a gentle smile. "Thank you, I'm handling it." The phone clicked. Kendra. "It's Marlene H.R. I have the regional VP looped in." "Good, I'm at the Speedway branch in Tucson. I've just been refused withdrawal service." The branch manager questioned my identity, ignored verification, and dismissed me in front of customers. Silence on the line, then Marlene said, "Did he know who you were?" I told him. Twice. The voice on the other end shifted. The calm turned cold. "We'll take care of. It give us 3 minutes." Kendra hung up, took a deep breath, and finally turned to face the room again. Sherry, trying to keep her hands from trembling, cleared her throat. "Miss Braxton, do you still want to process the withdrawal?" Kendra looked at her, young, nervous. "Maybe early 20s, probably just trying to survive the day." "No," she said gently. "Thank you, though. You handled that as best you could." Sherry looked both relieved and guilty. I wasn't sure what to do. You trusted your system. That's what you're trained to do. What matters is how you respond when something doesn't make sense. And you responded with curiosity. He responded with control. A moment passed. Stephen emerged again this time, walking slower. That same clipboard still clutched under his arm. Still, waiting on the cavalry. Kendra met his eyes. Without blinking, they're on their way. He chuckled just once. "You know if you really are. Who you say you are, there are better ways to handle, things you could have called ahead or brought proof instead. You show up here like you're setting me up? That's the thing," she said. "I didn't have to set anything up. You did that, all on your own." Stephen frowned, unsure if it was an insult. Then the branch phone rang. Everyone heard. Corey answered, "Monarch Federal Speedway branch, yes." One moment he looked at Stephen. "It's for you?" Stephen took the phone slowly, like it might bite him. "Hello? Yes. This is Stephen Aldridge." His eyes darted to Kendra. "She's yes. She's still here." He paused, then nodded. Once understood. He hung up and walked back to the middle of the lobby, looking around like he'd just realized the whole room had been watching Miss Braxton. He said, voice slightly unsteady now. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment? You had your moment?" She replied. But Stephen was about to learn that the apology he never planned to give was already too late. For the first time since she walked in, Kendra didn't have to say a word. Stephen stood there visibly trying to regroup his fingers, pressed flat against the clipboard like it might give him balance, but whatever confidence he came in with, it was thinning out. Fast look, he started. "Maybe things got a little tense. It's been a stressful morning and stop," Kendra said. Her voice sharp enough to silence him. Mid-sentence, a hush fell over. The branch Sherry pretended to focus on the computer. Corey didn't even bother pretending. The customers stayed frozen in place. All eyes were locked on the woman in the navy blouse, who hadn't raised her voice once, but now carried the entire room with 5 letters. "I don't want a speech," she added. "I want accountability." Stephen flinched like the word slapped him. "You're seriously trying to blame me for following security protocol?" "No," she said. "I'm holding you responsible for not following protocol. You refused to check my ID. You ignored system verification. You made it personal." He opened his mouth again, but she didn't stop. "You didn't stop to think. You didn't ask a single question. You decided what I was based on. How I looked, how I spoke, what I wore, and that's not just lazy. It's dangerous. You work in finance. Stephen, you don't get to lead with assumption at that moment. The front doors opened. 2 people walked in, both in dark blue suits. One was Marlene from HR. The other, tall, with sharp glasses and a clean-cut haircut, was Roland Pierce, the bank's regional VP. They walked directly toward Kendra, bypassing everyone else. Kendra, Roland said, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. "We got here as fast as we could appreciate it," she replied, her tone still calm, but razor-edged. Roland turned toward Stephen. "Let's move to your office." Stephen froze. "Wait, I didn't even know she was coming. She gave no notice." Roland didn't blink. "That's not the issue." Stephen looked toward Marlene for backup, but she was already shaking her head. "We've reviewed the live branch footage," she said. "There's audio. There's visual. It's very clear. I was doing my job," Stephen said, voice rising. "Now you're not being terminated because she's the CEO." Marlene cut in. "You're being terminated because you disregarded protocol, showed blatant disrespect, and created an unsafe atmosphere for a client and for your staff." He stood there stunned. Kendra finally stepped forward. "I could have fired you the second I walked back in, but I wanted you to hear why this matters." She gestured around the room. "You see all these people, they didn't know who I was. They watched it happen. Watched how you treated someone you didn't think was important." She paused. "That's a reputation stain that doesn't just wash off, it follows us, and I don't let that stain spread." Stephen's shoulders slumped. He looked small now, suddenly unsure of where to stand or what to say. Marlene gently motioned him toward the back office. He didn't argue as the door clicked shut behind them. A strange silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The heavy kind, like the oxygen had shifted in the room. Kendra turned toward the remaining staff. "I'll address the team in 5 minutes," she said quietly. "Please wrap up with your customers." Then she walked to the far end of the branch and sat in a chair alone for the first time since stepping through the doors. But the moment wasn't about reflection. Yet there was still one more truth. The staff needed to hear 5 minutes passed like 30. No one said much. Customers whispered, some slipped out, others lingered curious. The staff kept their eyes low, but their ears sharp. Something had shifted, and everyone felt it. When Kendra stood back up and walked to the center of the lobby, it wasn't as the woman who'd asked for a withdrawal earlier. It was as the leader everyone now recognized. "Can I speak with the staff, please?" she asked, her tone softer now. Sherry Corey and the 2 other tellers left their windows and gathered around the assistant branch manager, a man named Dennis, who'd stayed quiet through. The ordeal stepped forward as well. "I know this morning was unexpected," Kendra began, "but I want to explain something important. Not just about what happened, but why. It can't happen again." They stood quietly listening. "I've worked in this bank for 23 years, started as an intern, pushed papers, watched managers walk by without so much as a glance. I learned early on that some people only offer respect when they think you've earned it, and others they don't give it out unless ain't da by that unless you're a certain way. She glanced at Sherry, who looked like she might cry. Corey stood a little straighter when I came in today. I didn't want to be treated like a CEO. I just wanted to see how the branch ran, how people were spoken to. If our mission of integrity actually lived inside these walls, her voice didn't shake, but it landed heavy. What I saw instead was a manager make a decision based on assumption, no questions, no verification, just judgment. Dennis cleared his throat, Miss Braxton. If I may, some of us knew something felt off, but we weren't sure how to step in. Without overstepping. I understand, Kendra said, and that's why I'm here. She stepped closer to the group. It's not just about Stephen. It's about how we respond when we see something going wrong. Not just for customers, but for each other. That hesitation, that I didn't want to overstep instinct. It's what stops change before it starts silence. Then from the back, Corey finally spoke. I've only been here a year, but I've watched managers ignore people. I didn't want to be that person. But I froze up today. I saw what he was doing to you, and I didn't say anything. Kendra nodded. You're saying something now? Sherry added quietly. I knew something was off, too. I just didn't know if backing you up would get me in trouble. It won't. Kendra assured her speaking up when someone's being mistreated, especially in a place of business, is never a mistake. One of the other tellers, an older man named Leonard, looked over his glasses. Honestly, I think we've all seen Stephen act like that before, just not to someone with authority that hung in the air. Exactly. Kendra said. And if he talks to a CEO like that, how do you think he treats customers when no one's watching? No one had to answer. Everyone already knew. She looked around at the group. Real people, real faces, real voices. The very heartbeat of the company. Not its branding or buildings or ads, but these people moving forward. She said there's going to be a formal training session on client interaction and internal respect. I'll personally be sitting in on the first one, because if we can't hold each other accountable in here, she tapped the floor with her heel. We've got no business talking about trust out there. A slow ripple of agreement moved through. The staff heads nodded. Shoulders relaxed. She ended with, one last thought. It's not about who you think someone is. It's about treating every person with the same respect you'd give if you knew. But Kendra wasn't done yet because there was still one final lesson. The entire company needed to hear. The staff meeting wrapped quietly with a few handshakes, a couple of lingering questions, and several long, thoughtful stares. No one clocked out early. No one joked on the way back to their desk. Kendra didn't leave. Right away, she walked into the small break room, took a seat at the round table near the vending machine, and pulled out her phone. Not to check messages, but to stare at the screen, thinking, processing, absorbing the weight of what had just unfolded. It wasn't about pride. Not today. It was about what could have happened if she hadn't come in that morning dressed like every other customer, if she'd sent an assistant, if she'd worn her CEO badge or walked in flanked by execs. None of it would have happened. Stephen would have smiled, offered her coffee, bent over backward to help, and nothing would have changed. She knew that truth intimately. She remembered a letter they'd received months earlier. A woman in Flagstaff had written a complaint, said a manager dismissed her, spoke over her, and refused to honor a check she was trying to deposit for her elderly mother. The case had been marked resolved internal review. Said. The manager followed protocol. But something about the tone of that letter always stuck with her, the way the customer had written. It wasn't what he said. It was how quickly he decided I didn't belong there. Back then, Kendra couldn't prove intent today. She didn't have to. A quiet knock pulled her out of her thoughts. It was Roland, the regional VP. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Just thinking." He sat across from her. "I've worked with you a long time, Kendra. I've never seen you fire someone like that on the floor in front of staff customers. I didn't plan to," she replied. "Then why today?" She leaned back in her chair. Voice calm? "'Cause I needed them to see what accountability looks like in real time. No memos. No quiet transfers. Just the truth." Roland nodded slowly. "Some people, upstairs, might say you made it personal." She looked at him evenly. It was personal. And if they don't understand why it's part of the same problem, he didn't argue. Instead, he asked something she didn't expect. "Do you think he would have treated me the same way Kendra didn't?" Blink. "You were in a suit." "Roland, you're 6'3" and carry a VP badge. He would have rolled out a red carpet." He nodded again, quietly this time. They sat in silence for a moment. "You think?" The staff got the message. He finally asked Kendra, thought about Corey, about Sherry, even about Dennis, who had looked genuinely shaken. "After it all, they did," she said. "But more importantly, they felt it, and that stays longer than a message." He stood to leave, then paused. "Do you want me to handle the communication to the other branches?" Kendra stood too, gathering her things. "No, I'll do it myself. You're going to visit them, not right away." But eventually she smiled, just barely. "Might even leave." "The suit at home again?" Roland grinned. "Remind me not to be rude to any new walk-ins," she chuckled softly. "You're safe." As he left the room, Kendra took one last look around, the stale coffee pot, the half-filled bulletin board, the sound of quiet voices beyond the door. This wasn't just a place where money moved. It was a reflection of who they were when no one was watching. But before she could step out for the day, there was one final thing she needed to say to everyone before she left. The branch, Kendra asked for a quick announcement over the internal intercom. Nothing formal. Just a few words to wrap up a day. No one in that building would forget. "Hi, this is Kendra Braxton. Thank you to all team members for your patience and professionalism this morning. I'll be heading out shortly, but I wanted to say one last thing, just from me to you. Meet me in the lobby if you have a moment." It didn't take long. The employees gathered again, some leaning on desks, others standing in the background. Even the security guard came in from outside. It was casual, but every pair of eyes was fixed on her. Kendra stood in front of them, hands loosely clasped. No paper. No script. Today could have been a bad dream. Something you tell your spouse about when you get home, or just try to forget entirely. But it's not going to be that. Because today mattered. A few people shifted their weight. Listening deeper. Now. I walked in. This morning, not looking like the person you're used to seeing on a company video, and I did it. Because I needed to know what really happens here when no one's performing. When people believe they're dealing with just a customer, what I got was the truth unfiltered. She let that sit for a second. But the truth goes beyond one manager's mistake. The real truth is how all of you responded. Some of you froze, some of you hesitated. And that's human. But now, you've seen what silence allows. Et j'espère que vous avez aussi vu ce que peut créer le standing up. She scanned the room. Sherry was standing near Corey again. Leonard looked down at his shoes. Dennis, the assistant manager, stood, with his arms behind his back, face unreadable. We talk a lot about leadership most of the time. It sounds like strategy metrics meetings, but real leadership, real looks like holding the door open for a customer who's had a terrible day. It looks like speaking up when a colleague is out of line. It looks like refusing to be a bystander. Her voice softened. Sometimes, leadership means doing the hard thing in front of everyone, not because it's comfortable, but because people are watching, and you can either teach them fear or teach them courage. She took a breath. Stephen won't be coming back. That decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary because one moment like today, if left alone, becomes normal, and normal becomes policy. Then she smiled. Not. The CEO's smile from press photos, but something warmer. More worn in something that said she'd been where they were, that she was them. I'll be making visits to other branches in the coming months, not to test anyone, but to listen. And yes, sometimes I'll be dressed just like today, light laughter rippled through the group, and if any of you ever find yourself in a situation where you're unsure, ask yourself one thing. Would I treat this person the same way if I knew they could walk into a boardroom tomorrow and make a decision about my job? If the answer is no, then it's not the right way to treat them at all. Quiet agreement filled the space. She paused, looked around one last time, then added gently, "Thanks for hearing me, and thank you for staying open to learning, because that's how we grow, not just as a bank, but as people with that." She picked up her purse, offered a nod, and walked out the door. No fanfare, no security detail. Just a woman who reminded everyone what respect looks like when the suits are off and the truth is out in the open, because leadership isn't about who's watching. It's about how you behave when you think no one is. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to our channel for more real-world stories that challenge what we assume, what we